Hyderabad Central University and Pondicherry Central University. A well-known figure is the academic global honorary director, dictator of the Institute for Research in Social Science and Humanities, Telisheri, former member of ICHR, former visiting professor of many universities in Europe and America, and many more places. I'm proud to say that he is the final word in Indo-Portuguese history. I humbly invite Dr. K. Matthew to in our library.
Mentioning the name of each of you, I will start my talk. Today's seminar is focused on the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean regions with a special reference to the Malabar coast. I thought instead of talking things which I have been talking earlier, I would concentrate my attention on one of the themes which is not at all studied properly till now. For this, I am depending on a factual record written in Cochin by Di Costa, and the title of the book is Relatorio sobre Trato de Pimenta. It was published in the third volume of the book entitled Documentação Ultramarina Portuguesa, released from the institute in Lisbon. Then we have a number of, in reference to the relation between the kings on the Malabar coast and the Portuguese, which we find in Simão Botelho's book and various other documents, because many people would like to know the sources on which I depend, and the talk which I made should be documented. Otherwise, sometimes I think it was yesterday that the authors of the pieces do not give the details of the reference. I would like to mention that there were several attempts of the Portuguese to have relations with the local kings. Like the Samarin of Calicut, the king of Cochin, and the queen of Coilon, and so on. But this was because they had an high power in the society, and they were really great authority over the Malabar coast. The most important person was Samarin of Calicut, and then we have the king of Kainanur and so on. But here I am trying to speak about the relation between the Portuguese and the lesser rulers, or the kings who were not very powerful, as the Samarin or the king of Kainanur and so on. As you know, there was an important factory set up by the Portuguese in Cochin, and this factory could be considered an intermediary between the hinterland and the foreland. I mean to say that the hinterland is the area from where the spices were taken to Cochin. And not only spices but also timber and other things needed for the shipbuilding. And then there was a foreland. The foreland was Portugal, to which the commodities from India were taken. And the port or the factory at Cochin served as an intermediary between the hinterland and the foreland. So you can imagine how it was important to have relations with the people who wielded influence or authority in the hinterland. And I am not talking about the small petty kings in the northern part of Cochin. Yesterday, I think yesterday, Dr. Lomata was spoken about the relations with the certain kings and rulers. So here my concern is chiefly the relation between the Portuguese and the small rulers in the hinterland. I am sure that most of the people here are familiar with Vadakkan and Deccan. The kings of Deccan and rulers of Deccan and Vadakkan, they are not treated in detail in many of our works. And they were very important as far as the Portuguese trade was concerned. The Portuguese authorities wanted more and more timber as well as spices from the hinterland. And all these were taken to Cochin via, for example, here we have a river called Meenachil River. I think our guests are living near the river, Meenachil. And then there was another river to the south which is called Pamba River. And all these rivers were very important as far as the transportation of spices were concerned. So, as I casually mentioned, there was a shipbuilding center in Cochin. And shipbuilding center depended on the timber which was available in the hinterland. So on these two accounts, the relation between the Portuguese and the kings was very important. Suppose they did not collaborate with the Portuguese would not get sufficient amount of timber in Cochin for the shipbuilding. Nor will they get sufficient spices in the hinterland, from the hinterland. For example, pepper, ginger, cinnamon, cardamom, and a number of other items were produced in the hinterland, and these were to be delivered to the Portuguese factory on the western coast of Malabar. And these things were transported through waterways. Small thodies, thodi means, I hope most of the people here know thodi. Thodi is a small vessel which may carry up to 25 quintals of pepper. And these quintals of pepper were loaded in the thodi, and the thodi has to go via Meenachil or Pamba River up to Vevarad Gail, and from there to Cochin. The Cochin was the most important factory. As you know, Cochin worked as the chief headquarters of the Portuguese in India up to 1530. Then it continued to be the headquarters of the Portuguese commercial empire. So all the spices that were needed were collected in Cochin, and then they were taken to Portugal via Goa. So here in this case, the goodwill of the kings in the hinterland will be very important. If a king did not want to see that their products were not distributed or sent to Cochin, they could do so. For example, to the hinterland, they could send it to the other part of the eastern coast of India. Probably you must have heard about a pass called Arigao Pass. Arigao Pass is a pass which connects the Coromandel coast with the Malabar coast. So some of the people were sending pepper from the region of Koyron to Tamil Nadu, eastern coast of India, through Arigao Pass. If the Portuguese kept good relations with the people over there or the small rulers, it was possible for them to get more and more spices. So that's why it was found necessary to have better relations with the king, the local rulers, like Kodakanpur, Dekkanpur and so on. Or Kaimans, the ruler of Mannad or Alenad. We also made mention of kings, Kaimans of Kartas and Kaimans. They are not very important persons, but they were important as far as the transportation of spices was concerned, because they should collaborate with the Portuguese. So how to get their collaboration? For this, they have devised a plan of giving pensas or annuities. Pensas. I think Father Pius would translate it as subsidies or grants. Pensa means a kind of a grant given to them occasionally to see that the spices were not diverted to any other place than Cochin. So every year the rulers in the hinterland, like Vadakanpur, Dekkanpur, Karta of Maluvang, Kaiman of Mannad Kaiman, and probably the Karta of Pare also was included. So this is how they used to get the collaboration of the local rulers. there are two words which should be made, which should be noted, namely Kopa and Tensa. Kopa, I think we used to speak about Kapam. I don't know whether Kopa is the same as Kapam. Anyway, the Kopa was given to the king of Cochin because he lost his uncle in the fight between the Portuguese and the Samarin, and because of that, the Portuguese regularly gave the king of Cochin Kopa, a good sum every year. And then the Tensa was given to other kings. And even the king of Cochin used to get the Tensa or Annuit or whatever you may translate that. The book which is going to be released by Professor Pius Malayakandan is on the book which I have mentioned, namely Relatorio sobre o Trato de Pimenta. So this book gives a lot of information about the relation between the rulers in the interior places. Then it's not only spices, because this area was the area up to Iratipeta or Kanjirapati, and all these areas were important places of the production of pepper, ginger and other spices. Therefore, collaboration a good bit of the rulers in this place was very much necessary. Now, it was not only spices which were needed for the factory in Cochin, but they also wanted to have timber for the production of building of ships. So as you may remember, earlier Jaipur was the most important center of shipbuilding. Even before the arrival of the Portuguese, or for centuries together, Jaipur was well known for the shipbuilding. There were very expert merchants or maestries, and also whom we can call shipwrights. And these shipwrights were assisted by Kanasis. Kanasis constituted a group of people who were working in the dockyard. If you remember, even in the train accident in Periman, nobody could help except the Kanasis. And the same thing happened in the Navaluni incident, where also the Kanasis had to come and help to take out the portion of the train. So they were very much interested and they were very active in the shipyards. And they have their own ministry or a leader with whom the people had established contacts. For example, if a ship is being constructed or built in Jaipur, the various stages of the shipbuilding depend solely on the Kanasis. And then even the launching of the ship was done very technically by the Kanasis, because it's very difficult from the beach to launch a ship into the sea. There are several techniques. For example, they would spread the leaves of the coconut tree, and over that they keep a certain kara or some timber on which they can easily launch the ship. So they were very experts in this. And then they have normally kara or a dog, and then a chain, and then kapis. These are the things which were very simple things. With these simple items, they were able to launch the ship and also able to ship certain heavy pieces of timber from one place to another. Then, when Jaipur was not flourishing, and the relation of the Portuguese with the Samarin became worsened, they started building ships in Cochin. In fact, when we look at the whole change of shipbuilding, we can find that it was chiefly because of the Portuguese that Cochin came to prominence and Calicut was relegated to the background. So, for the shipbuilding, they needed a lot of timber. For the ship, for example, Anjali was very important as far as the stem and other things were needed for concern. Anjali was available in this region, even from Adirajapeta and other regions. They have transported Anjali timber for the shipbuilding, and that was done through our Veenachiraga. and then they shifted them up to the Vevanataka Island and from there to Cochin. So naturally they should get in touch with the local rulers. That's how they were giving a sort of grant or a subsidy to the rulers of Vadamanpur, Teganpur and so on. The same thing was also necessary for transportation of timber from the areas, sites of Pampa River. Then there were other items that would be considered for the necessary for the ship building. It's not only the annually, teak was also necessary, and certain parts which were exposed to the water was built by using teak wood. Teak wood was considered to be the best for the ship building. But you cannot imagine the entire ship or entire vessel being made of teak wood. Different parts of the ships were requiring different types of timber. Some pliable or thing which can be easily worked on will be needed. Teak was used for external parts of the ship because teak had the resistance power as far as the ship worms were concerned. So ships can destroy the ship, and then there can be leakage. Because of the leakage, the ship may be sinking. So to avoid that, the teak was very much necessary, and we had plenty of teak in this region, and the teak definitely helped them. And the quality of the teak wood is chiefly based on the resistance towards various climates. The Portuguese were having ships built in Portugal, but they were used to a temperature of the water different from that of our lands. The temperature was different, and therefore other timbers or other sorts of timber could be used for constructing ships there. But here in India, to the warm climate, and the water was also not as cold as the European like water is. Therefore, because of the temperature, there was a possibility of more and more worms being bred, and then these worms could destroy the ship. And therefore, teak was considered to be the best as far as India was concerned. And initially, the shipyard in Cochin was being used for carrying the ship. Suppose there was a repair to be made for the ships that were coming from Portugal to India, they had to be repaired, and therefore there was a need for a place where they could repair the ships. And gradually they started building the ships, and I think from 1510 onwards ships were built in Cochin. Therefore the teak was necessary. The theoreticians, or those people who wrote manuals about the shipbuilding, like Fernando Oliveira and so on, speak about the quality of the timber. They say that timber has a bitter sap, and bitter sap will be resisting that kind of worms. And how do we find the bitter sap trees? For example, annually has also the bitter sap. And when you find the leaf rather tough and not soft, then you can imagine that such trees will have bitter sap. So this bitter sap was necessary to avoid the worms, and that's why teak was necessary. So I think a lot of teak wood and annually and other sorts of timber was transported from here. Then another thing which I would like to mention is that there are other varieties which were used, because for the ribs, for the ship and other parts of the ship, timber of different qualities was used there. So all this transportation had to be done through the rivers, and the rivers are under the authority of the local rulers or local chieftains. And therefore it was necessary that the Portuguese should have more and more relations with them. So all the people who used to get the densa or the grant are mentioned in the book I mentioned, namely Simam Motelius, and then the factual record of Da Costa. Now, with regard to the important rulers, there were treaties signed between the Portuguese and the local rulers. For example, we have the treaty between the Portuguese and the King of Coilon or Queen of Coilon. Then we have the copies of the treaties between the King of Cochin and the Portuguese. Then we have the treaties between the King of Calicut and the Portuguese. As you know, well, Calicut was not stable, always there were troubles against the Portuguese. And all these treaties are reproduced in a collection called the Quran by Beaker, edited by Beaker. I think there are about 13 volumes containing all the treaties. So we have enough sources to deal with these things. So I just want to say that the Portuguese had relations with the small chieftains and they were important as far as the trade was concerned, as far as the shipbuilding was concerned. Then, as you know, for other things like making more and more people aware of the Christian faith and bringing them to Christian faith was also done to the rivers, because many of the missionaries would travel by the rivers to the hinterland, and there should not be any objection on the part of the local rulers. We have heard about the queen of the queen of Kadithirthi, that is, she belonged to the Vadakalpur, and the queen of Vadakalpur was supporting certain sections of the faithful, and they were also welcoming the missionaries. For example, Mark Simon was coming as a Nestorian bishop, and he was entertained by the queen of Vadakalpur, and Kadithirthi became an important center for him for a couple of years. And that would mean that all the people were traveling through the rivers, and the local rulers like kingdom of Pimenta or whatever who supported it. Also, we can think about the movement of the missionaries up to Alamad and other regions. Now, the reason why I was concentrating my attention only on the southern part of Kerala is because I considered Cochin as the most important port to which all the things were brought. But there was also in Calicut there was no permanent factory. There were occasionally, for example, in the beginning, in 1500 there was a factory, then it was demolished in 1502, and then again in 1513 there was another factory and a fortress. Then around 1530 or so it was demolished. Then again several times there were demolition and rebuilding of the factories and fortresses in the north. Ranganur too had a factory, and there was a fortress. Now we call Kottapuram. Kottapuram was supposed to be an important fortress. But these areas are not touched here in my short talk, because I thought I would concentrate on Cochin and the rulers in the hinterland. So I am happy to be a part of the seminar. I hope it will be quite useful for the students who are interested in taking up their research projects, and also will definitely help the department to come up with more and more projects in this line. We should also make a mention of the book which was released recently. This is a book written by Dr. James John on the social changes in India and the Portuguese or social changes in Kerala. We know we have a lot of impact from the Portuguese in our day-to-day life, in the culinary habit, in the position of women, of which Father James will be talking, and also in our day-to-day activities, in the religious matters, very great influence was seen. So these are treated in the book of James Maharam, which has been recently released. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you, sir. Gratitude is the best flower that stems out of human mind. To extend the sincere gratefulness in the behalf of whole history department, I invite Dr. Suresh Jose for word of thanks.
Very warm good morning to one and all. A formal function is always concluded with a formal appreciation of gratefulness. We have come to the end of the inaugural session of Monday International Seminar on the Portuguese in Indian Ocean region with special reference to Malabar Coast. I take this opportunity to extend our most heartfelt thanks to all our guests who have come from different destinations for their support and cooperation. First of all, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to the program manager of our college, Very Reverend Dr. Joseph Palangambi, who was a professor and who has always been a person supportive of academic discussions. On behalf of faculty and students of the Department of History and all gathered here, I extend our sincere gratitude to him. Our principal, Dr. Joey Joe, is always a guiding light and pillar of support for all of us. I take this opportunity to thank our principal, Dr. Joey Joe, who presided over the function. Thank you, sir. We are very grateful to Professor K.S. Matthew, former head of the Department of History, Pondicherry Central University, for spending his precious time with us. Thank you, sir, for your inspiring freedom writers. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Vidor Luis Castro Rodriguez, one of the key speakers of this one-day international seminar, for his presence and support. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to thank Dr. James John, Vice Principal of St. Thomas College, Wala, and Head of the Department of History, who is the General Coordinator of this seminar, for making this seminar a reality. We are proud to congratulate you for the publication of your book on the Portuguese and social cultural changes in Kerala. On behalf of all gathered here, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to you. Now I would like to mention our deep sense of appreciation and gratitude to all the delegates from Portugal who are here to present their papers. Professor Paes Narakandathil, Jawaharlal University, Delhi, faculty members from various colleges and university, research scholars and students from various colleges and university, members of Heritage Society Bala, and faculty members and students of Department of History and non-teaching staff of St. Thomas College, Bala. I take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you. Once again, thank you all.